Late one night, Emma was driving home from her best friend's house. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale glow on the empty highway. She had a 2-hour drive ahead of her, but the silence of the road felt calming. Her favorite playlist was softly playing, and the cool breeze from the slightly open window kept her alert. As Emma drove further, she noticed something strange. The landmarks she was familiar with, the old gas station, the diner with the flickering neon sign, were nowhere to be seen. Instead, there were endless stretches of road and thick woods on either side. "This is weird," she muttered to herself. She pulled out her phone to check the GPS. It showed the route clearly, but the estimated time to her destination wasn't changing. It remained stuck at 45 minutes, no matter how far she drove. Emma frowned. Maybe the GPS is glitching. She kept driving. After a while, she saw headlights in her rearview mirror. A car was approaching fast. Relieved to see another vehicle, Emma decided to slow down a bit and let it pass her. But the car didn't pass. Instead, it stayed right behind her, its headlights glaring into her car. Feeling uneasy, Emma sped up. The other car matched her speed. She tried slowing down again, but it slowed too. Now, her heart was pounding. Who was driving that car? Why weren't they passing her? Emma decided to pull over to the side of the road. Maybe the car would just drive past her, but as soon as she stopped, the other car stopped too, a few yards behind her. The highway was silent except for the sound of crickets and the faint hum of her engine. "Okay, this is getting creepy," Emma said, gripping the steering wheel. She locked her doors and waited. The other car didn't move. Its engine was still running, and the lights stayed on. After a few tense minutes, Emma decided to drive again. As soon as she started moving, the car followed. Her fear turned into panic. She pressed her foot hard on the gas pedal, racing down the highway. The trees blurred past her, and the wind howled through the slightly open window. The other car kept up with her, never falling too far behind. Suddenly, Emma saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. She screamed and slammed on the brakes. Her car skidded to a halt just inches from the figure. Breathing heavily, she stared through the windshield. It was a man, tall and thin, dressed in a dark suit. His face was pale, and his eyes seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. He stood completely still, staring at her. Emma didn't know what to do. She couldn't drive forward, and she didn't dare reverse toward the other car. She honked her horn, hoping the man would move. He didn't. Then, slowly, the man raised his arm and pointed at her. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. The man's eyes seemed to pierce into her soul. She couldn't look away. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. Emma turned her head to see the car behind her smashing into her rear bumper. The force jolted her forward, but she managed to keep control of the wheel. When she looked back at the road, the man was gone. Without thinking, Emma floored the gas pedal and sped away. The other car followed her again, its front bumper now dented and its headlights flickering. Emma's hands were shaking as she gripped the wheel. She needed to find help, but there were no signs of civilization, just the endless road and the dark forest. Her phone had no signal, and the time on the GPS was still stuck at 45 minutes. After what felt like an eternity, Emma saw a dim light in the distance. It looked like a gas station. She felt a glimmer of hope and drove toward it. The other car suddenly stopped following her and disappeared into the darkness. When Emma reached the gas station, she quickly parked and ran inside. The place was empty except for an old man sitting behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up as she entered. "You okay, miss?" he asked, his voice raspy. I think someone was following me," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Can you call the police?" The old man frowned. "Following you? On this highway?" Emma nodded. "Yes, there was a car behind me the whole time, and there was this man in the road. He just disappeared." The old man's expression turned serious. He put down his newspaper and leaned forward. "What did the man look like?" Emma described the pale man in the suit. The old man's face grew pale. He shook his head slowly. "You're lucky to be alive. he said. "That's the highway phantom. People say he appears to travelers on this road. If you stop for him, you never make it out." Emma felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. "But I didn't stop. I almost did. But then that car hit me and I drove away." The old man nodded. "That car might have saved your life. Folks say the phantom lures people to stop, then they vanish. No one knows where they go." Emma's legs felt weak. She leaned against the counter for support. "What should I do now?" The old man pointed to a back road behind the gas station. "Take that route. It'll lead you to the main town. Don't go back on the highway." Emma thanked him and left. She followed the back road as he'd instructed, her heart still pounding. After an hour of driving, she finally reached the town and saw the familiar lights of civilization. She pulled over in a crowded parking lot and broke down in tears. Emma never took that highway again. To this day, she doesn't know who or what was driving the car that saved her, but she often wonders if it was just another traveler or something else trying to warn her about the phantom. And sometimes, late at night, she dreams of the endless road and the man with glowing eyes pointing at her in the moonlight. Days passed, but Emma couldn't shake the memory of that eerie night. No matter how much she tried to convince herself it was over, the image of the man's glowing eyes haunted her. She found herself looking over her shoulder more often, especially while driving. Even the faintest sight of headlights behind her made her heart race. One night, curiosity got the better of her. She decided to look up stories about the highway phantom. Sitting in the safety of her living room, Emma typed the words into a search engine. What she found sent a shiver down her spine. Dozens of stories from other travelers described similar encounters on the same stretch of highway. A pale man in a suit appearing out of nowhere, pointing or staring. Some stories ended with the traveler vanishing, while others barely escaped, just like her. There was also talk about a rest stop that no one could explain. It would appear to lost drivers during their journey, offering them shelter and food. But those who stopped there often didn't return. Locals referred to it as the rest stop of no return. Emma sat back in her chair, goosebumps prickling her skin. Could that gas station where she had stopped also be a part of this mystery? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was her friend Sarah calling. "Hey, Em, haven't heard from you all week. Are you okay?" Sarah asked. Emma hesitated, unsure if she should share the strange details of her encounter. But her need to talk to someone outweighed her fears. "Something really weird happened on my way home from your place," Emma said. She recounted the night, the strange road, the man, the car that followed her, and the gas station conversation. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. "That's terrifying," Sarah finally said. "You know what? You shouldn't go back there alone. Maybe we can take a trip together, retrace your steps, and see if that gas station really exists. It might help you put this behind you." The suggestion seemed absurd at first, but the more Emma thought about it, the more sense it made. If she could confirm whether the gas station was real or just a hallucination brought on by fear, maybe she could move on. 2 days later, Emma and Sarah set out in Sarah's car. The plan was simple: follow the route Emma had taken and stop where the GPS showed the gas station. Sarah, with her usual adventurous spirit, even packed snacks as though they were on a road trip. As they drove down the same highway, Emma couldn't help but feel the same sense of unease creeping in. The woods stretched endlessly on either side, and the road felt as desolate as before. Hours passed, and just like her last trip, the landmarks she expected never appeared. The time on the GPS seemed to freeze again, stuck at 45 minutes. "This is where it started last time," Emma said, her voice shaky. "Keep an eye out." The road stretched on, and soon enough, headlights appeared behind them. The car began to close the distance rapidly, much like the one Emma had seen before. Emma's stomach dropped. "It's happening again," she whispered. Sarah glanced in the rearview mirror, her face growing serious. "Just stay calm. Let's see if it passes us." But just like last time, the car didn't pass. It stayed glued to their bumper, its headlights cutting through the night like a predator stalking its prey. Emma felt her breathing quicken. "Sarah, do something." Without warning, Sarah yanked the steering wheel to the right, pulling off the road and onto a dirt path. The other car zipped by, speeding ahead into the darkness. "We lost them," Sarah said, her grip on the wheel tight. "Where are we now?" Emma asked, looking around. They were on a narrow gravel path surrounded by towering trees. The headlights of Sarah's car illuminated a wooden sign that read, "Rest stop ahead, 1 mile." Emma froze. The words felt like a warning. "Should we turn back?" she asked. But Sarah was already inching the car forward. "No way. You said something about a rest stop, right? This could be it." They drove the mile in silence, and soon a small building came into view. The rest stop looked old and weathered, its windows glowing with a dim, warm light. A faded sign above the entrance read, "Open 24 hours." The parking lot was empty. Emma's pulse quickened as they parked. Something about the place felt wrong, but Sarah was already stepping out of the car. "Wait," Emma said, clutching Sarah's arm. "What if this is one of those places from the stories?" Sarah smiled nervously. "That's why we're here, right? To find out." They pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning supplies. Behind the counter was a young woman in a uniform, her face blank and expressionless. "Welcome," the woman said in a monotone voice. "Can I help you?" Sarah ordered 2 coffees while Emma wandered around the rest stop, her unease growing. The place looked normal at first glance, but the more she observed, the stranger it felt. There were no prices on the shelves, no music playing, and no other customers. Suddenly, Emma's eyes landed on a corkboard near the restroom. Pinned to it were dozens of photographs. Each photo showed a person standing outside the rest stop, smiling at the camera. Some of the photos were old and yellowed, while others looked new. Emma's blood ran cold when she recognized one of the faces. It was the old man from the gas station. Her hands trembled as she scanned more of the photos. The pale man in the suit was there too, his expression unchanged. "Sarah," Emma called, her voice trembling. Sarah hurried over, her coffee forgotten. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked. Emma pointed to the corkboard. "Look." As Sarah's eyes darted over the pictures, the color drained from her face. What is this?" The door to the rest stop suddenly creaked open. Emma and Sarah turned to see who had entered, but there was no one there, just the empty highway beyond. A cold wind blew through the room, and the lights began to flicker. "I think we need to leave," Emma whispered. But when they turned back, the woman at the counter was gone. The rest stop was completely silent now, and the warm glow of the lights had turned an ominous shade of red. "We're leaving," Sarah said, grabbing Emma's hand. As they ran for the car, they heard a low, echoing laugh behind them. It was deep and otherworldly, filling the air and making the ground beneath them seem to hum. They didn't look back as they jumped into the car and sped away, gravel kicking up behind them. When they finally reached the main highway, the rest stop was nowhere to be seen. Emma and Sarah never spoke of the incident again, but sometimes Emma wonders if the phantom was trying to warn her all along. To this day, travelers report sightings of a mysterious rest stop, but no one knows who or what runs it. Some say the photos on the corkboard are all that remain of those who stayed too long. Weeks passed, but Emma and Sarah couldn't erase the eerie experience from their minds. Every time Emma drove at night, she kept an eye out for anything unusual: flickering headlights, shadowy figures, or the faint hum of invisible laughter. The highway felt like it was watching her, waiting for her return. Sarah, usually the bold one, had grown quieter since their visit to the rest stop. She avoided conversations about the trip and flinched whenever Emma brought it up. But one rainy evening, as they sat in Emma's apartment with mugs of tea, Sarah finally spoke. I can't stop thinking about that place," she admitted, staring into her mug. "Those photos, they felt like a warning, like we were inches away from being next." Emma nodded, shivering at the memory. I keep seeing the faces in my dreams, and that laugh. It didn't sound human." Sarah looked up, her eyes serious. What if it wasn't? What if that place isn't just haunted, it's feeding on people? The idea chilled Emma, but deep down, she couldn't ignore the thought. The rest stop, the phantom, even the car that had followed her, it all felt connected. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she felt like it wasn't over. Not yet. Determined to find answers, Emma spent the next week researching. She combed through online forums and old newspaper articles, piecing together what she could about the phantom, the highway, and the mysterious rest stop. Malcolm Green, an investigative journalist who had written extensively about unexplained phenomena in the area. His articles hinted at bizarre disappearances, strange sightings, and ghostly encounters. Emma tracked him down and sent him an email pouring out her story. She didn't expect a reply, but a few days later, her phone buzzed with a message. "Emma, your story matches several cases I've studied. The rest stop is real, but it isn't a place in the way we think of it. It's something older, something that moves, choosing where and when to appear. If you're still searching for answers, meet me at the Crescent Diner on Route 89. Midnight. But know this, curiosity comes at a cost. The rest stop never lets its visitors go completely. Once you've seen it, you're part of its story now." Malcolm Green. Emma's hands shook as she read the email. She forwarded it to Sarah, who called her within minutes. "Are you really going to meet this guy?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with worry. "I don't know," Emma admitted. "But what if he's right? What if that place hasn't forgotten about us?" That night, Emma and Sarah drove to the Crescent Diner. It was a small, run-down place tucked away on a quiet stretch of road. The parking lot was almost empty, and the neon sign buzzed faintly in the misty air. Malcolm Green was easy to spot. A wiry man in his 50s with graying hair and piercing eyes. He sat in a corner booth, flipping through a battered notebook. When Emma and Sarah approached, he nodded, gesturing for them to sit. "I didn't think you'd actually come," he said, his voice gravelly. "We need to know what's happening," Emma said firmly. "What is that place? Why did it come for us?" Malcolm leaned forward, his expression grim. "The rest stop isn't a building. It's a trap. A manifestation of something far older and darker than we understand. It shows up to lure in travelers, people who are lost, scared, or curious. And once you enter, it marks you." Sarah paled. "Marks us? What does that mean?" Malcolm hesitated, then pulled out a photograph from his notebook. It showed the corkboard from the rest stop, the same one Emma and Sarah had seen. But there was something different. At the bottom corner of the board, barely visible, were two blurry new photos. One was of Emma, the other was of Sarah. Emma's breath caught. This can't be real." "It's real," Malcolm said, "and it means the rest stop isn't done with you. It might be years, or it might be tomorrow, but once it chooses someone, it keeps calling them back." Sarah shook her head. "No, we're not going back there. We barely escaped the first time." "That's what everyone thinks," Malcolm said quietly, "until it finds a way to pull them in again." Over the next few weeks, strange things began happening. Emma would wake up in the middle of the night to find her GPS open, the route leading back to the highway displayed on the screen. Sarah's car radio would flicker on by itself, playing static that seemed to hum with faint whispers. One evening, Emma glanced out her apartment window and froze. Parked across the street was the car, the same one that had followed her on the highway. Its headlights were off, but she could feel the weight of its presence. When she blinked, it was gone. The breaking point came when Sarah found a note tucked under her windshield wiper. The paper was old and brittle, the words scrawled in shaky handwriting, "Midnight, back where it began." Sarah called Emma in a panic. "It's dragging us back, Em. I don't know how, but it is." Emma knew she was right. Whatever force was tied to the rest stop wasn't going to let them escape so easily. That night, Emma and Sarah found themselves driving back to the highway, their dread growing with each mile. The road was just as desolate as before, the woods pressing in on either side. The GPS once again froze at 45 minutes, and before long, the headlights appeared behind. This time, Emma didn't try to escape. She glanced at Sarah. If it's calling us, maybe we need to face it. The headlights followed them as they pulled off the highway and onto the gravel path. The sign appeared again. Rest stop ahead, 1 mile. The rest stop looked the same, its faint glow like a beacon in the dark. But this time, the parking lot wasn't empty. The car that had followed them was there, along with several other vehicles. All their engines were silent, but the air buzzed with tension. Emma and Sarah stepped out, hearts pounding. The door creaked open before they touched it, the same deep laugh echoing into the night. "Whatever happens," Sarah whispered, gripping Emma's hand tightly, "we stick together." They stepped inside, the warm glow swallowing them whole.